back here. There we go. We are live. Good morning, lovely people, and good evening to everyone from the US and Canada. I have the absolute pleasure to run another Upscale Brief interview, and today I'm introducing to you Joseph Alvaro. I'm going to get you to do that in a minute, Joseph. I'm really, really excited about this because Joseph actually runs a project that is so aligned with Loving Life After Loss, with our movement here. And I cannot wait for him to share a little bit more about it. But first, do you want to say a few words about you, Joseph? Welcome to our beautiful Upscale Brief interview this morning and your evening. How are you?
Hello, Maria. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. Well, I don't know what you want to know of me. I mean, you say you want to know a little bit about me. I was a film and television producer for many years. I produced television commercials for dozens and dozens of clients that everyone knows, international clients, domestic clients here in the United States. Eventually, I started directing some, and I did that for, oh my gosh, I guess I started when I was just out of graduate school. So I was 23 maybe, and started working as a PA, and then eventually as a production coordinator, and then a producer, started producing commercials, and then started directing some. And then I met this fella at an agency, and he was head of production, and he said, why don't you come produce commercials here? And I'm like, well, why would I do that? He said, well, because we pay you a ton of money and you do half the work. I'm like, all right, sign me up. So that's how I ended up being an agency producer for many, many years. Until my wife got sick, and then it was just impossible to do the, go from suburban New Jersey to Manhattan, and the long hours and what have you. It just became very difficult. So I started doing some consulting work with agencies, actually on the other side, where I was a cost consultant, where I could actually work from home and then just go to meetings and what have you. And that's the other flip side. Is we were hired by the client, the like Reckitt Benckiser, Cadbury, different brands and different holding companies would hire us then to look at their production spend. So then we'd work with the advertising agencies. And the reason they hired me is because I could look at a budget and I knew every penny was buried. And I could look at a storyboard and say, okay, explain to me why you're shooting it this way and not this way. If you shoot it this way, it may cost us less. And then things like repurposing material. So if I was going to shoot something, if they were going to shoot something, we would make sure all the different brands within the organization knew that we were going out to shoot, where we were going to shoot, and do you want us to pick up anything for you while we're shooting there? And then oftentimes they'll say, yeah, if we're on a beach and you got a sunset, we need a sunset. Oftentimes we'll take a still photographer with us so they can capture stuff. So things like that, if they want a product or something and they know we're shooting somewhere and they want a background, we can do that. So it just became a matter of optimizing the production spend. So I did that for a couple of years until she passed away. And then once she passed away, even that became like, all right, this is not going to work, because I did have to go to meetings in Manhattan and fly different places. So I got a general contractor's license and started doing things around here, renovating, doing renovations for people, remodeling and stuff like that. Because I could drop my daughter off at school, be at work at 8, pick her up at 4:30, and take her to lacrosse or whatever she was doing. So that's a little bit about me. I was married 25 years.
That is really, for everybody watching this is really just a little bit, because I was thinking, how are we going to do this introduction? Like when I saw your background, Joseph, and I had a look on LinkedIn, and we had a really nice chat prior to this interview. And then you sent me your short bio, and I even had to cut some of the stuff out because there was so much stuff that you did in your life. And I absolutely love that, because it brings memories back from my advertising days. Just when you said the word storyboard, I'm like, oh my God, because I spent a decade in the advertising world. So I've been through all of that from a very different perspective to you. I was in accounts, I was an account director, and I've been to so many shoots and productions. It's really, really beautiful to hear that again. you just completely skipped all these parts that we definitely want to delve into a little bit deeper, if you're okay with that. When you said, and then when my wife passed away and you went on, I'm like, hold on, we would love to hear a little bit more about your beautiful wife. Tell us about how long have you been married? How, how was your life before? And I'd really like to hear about her.
We were together 27 years and we were married
Wow.
25 years.
Yeah.
I had met her in an elevator in Manhattan going to
No
visit.
way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that part. I love it.
So she was a so anyways, this woman gets in the elevator with me. I'm going to visit a friend, and there are 4 elevator banks in this building. It's a beautiful building on 98th and Broadway on the Upper West Side.
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, and there's these beautiful old pre-war huge apartments. And each elevator bank goes up to 2 apartments on every floor. That's it. So we get in the elevator, she gets in, and I push the button to go, same floor. She's, and she's going the same floor. I don't think anything of it. And we're going up, and she's standing, I can tell she's a dancer. She's got a chorus line silk jacket on. A lot of my friends I had studied theater in Detroit, Michigan. And when I came to NYU graduate film school, a bunch of my friends kind of drifted up to New York too, from theater to work on Broadway and off Broadway. And so I had all these theater people around me that I'd known for 4 years. So and they knew Broadway dancers. So I just assumed she's wearing a chorus line silk jacket. I assumed she's in the show, right? I said to her, "Oh, are you in the show?" And she looks at me and says, "I am not a Broadway gypsy." I was like, oh, okay. And I knew exactly what she meant by that. A Broadway gypsy is a chorus girl, and she just kind of bounces around show to show to earn a living. I'm like, oh. But I knew she was a dancer because the way she stood. So we get off the elevator goes up to where it's going, the doors open, we both get out, and we go to the same door. And there's only 2 doors to go to. I'm like, okay, this is really weird.
I love this.
My friend Pam opens the door, and we go in, and she introduces us. She introduces Frances to me, and her roommate was moving out, and her boyfriend was there helping them pack, and Frances was moving into her roommate's old bedroom. So she was there to give her a deposit check.
Yeah.
So we're sitting down and talking in the living room, and I look at her and I said, so I didn't want to make another mistake. I'd already been shot down once. And I knew not to say to her, are you from Jamaica? Because that's just like the dumbest thing anyone can say. That's what I said. So what island are you from? And she said, well, I'm from Grenada. I said, oh, you have a communist prime minister, Maurice Bishop. And she says, how do you know his name? I'm like, I read a lot. I mean, I read everything. That's what I do. I like to read. I like to keep up on what's going on. And then from there, I
had their attention.
Yeah, so we went down. We went home together. We went home. We went down the elevators together, and I remember her. Broadway goes north and south, and the subways run under it. And she crossed the street to the uptown side. I'm like, and I couldn't figure out why, because she had to go downtown, and that was on the side we were on.
Yeah.
So years later, we're at the dinner table, and I said to her, the kids were older and whatever, we were talking. I said, so I have to ask you, why did you cross the street and go to the wrong side? You had to go uptown. I mean, you were going to the uptown side and you had to go downtown. She said, I was just so flummoxed. I didn't know what to do. I just was like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, really? She goes, yeah, you had me. You just had me. And she goes, I just didn't know which way was up.
I love
said,
it. I love it so much.
So a couple of weeks later, I went over to see Pam again, visit my friend, but she wasn't there. She was with her boyfriend up in New Hampshire.
I need to know, you did not exchange numbers at that point. You just went opposite ways.
Well, I knew she was moving into Pam's. I mean, she was there to give her, so I knew where she would be. So I went to Pam's house with my roommate to see Pam, and she wasn't there. And Harry and I were like, but Frances was there, and she was cooking dinner with a friend of hers from Bennington College. They were classmates at Bennington, and
Yeah.
excuse me,
That's good.
and she said, "Would you like to stay for dinner?" And Harry and I are like, "Sure, what,
Yeah.
you're making dinner for us? Absolutely." So Harry went out and got a bottle of wine. She asked me to help put together her bed because she'd just gotten her bed delivered and needed the frame. So I while she was cooking, I put together her bed for her, and then I think she asked me to hang some shades, so I hung some shades for her, and
Mhm.
then we had dinner. We had this wonderful dinner. It was a great time. And then Louise went home and Harry went home with her. And then I stayed. I never left.
Wow.
I mean, I never
I
left
love
that.
this.
I mean, we were just, that
I
was it.
love this.
For
This
the
is
rest
such a
of our
beautiful
lives, we were
story.
like glued to each other. So
Oh.
we dated for a year. No, we dated for a year and then
Mhm.
we got engaged. And then a year later, we got married. So we were together
How did you
27.
propose? I
Okay,
love
so
this. I didn't
how do I
expect this
propose?
to start with a
So I was
romantic
visiting
love
my,
story, but
okay,
I
so
love it.
I was visiting my grandfather in Florida,
Yeah.
and my grandmother had passed away a few years
Mm.
beforehand, so he was alone. So I just went down to visit him, just to hang out for a week and
Yeah.
go fishing and whatever. And I'm down there, and I said to him, "I think I want to ask this girl to marry me." And he's like, "Yeah," Now he's an old Irish guy, so.
Mm.
Um, but he was a lawyer. He was very well educated, very knowledgeable, very learned, and I knew, I mean, he's what? He was in his 80s, 70s, let's say late 70s, early 80s, I guess. And so I knew all I had to do is tell him what country she was from, and he would fill in the blanks. So I said, "Well, she's from
Wow.
Grenada." He's like, "Oh, okay." So I didn't have to say, "Oh, she's black," or all, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, or anything else. All I'd say was, "She's from Grenada." And he's
Mm.
like, "Okay." So so he said, "Well," he said, "if you love this girl, you ought to marry her. You ought to ask her." Like, okay, so I call her up on the phone and I ask her.
On the phone?
Yeah, and she calls down there. So she says yes. So she tells her. So when I come back, when I come back to New York, to Manhattan, when I see her, she says, "My mom says you have to ask me in person." I'm like,
Yes, I agree.
I said,
That's fair,
"Okay."
mom.
So I got down on the knee and I asked her to marry me. It's real simple.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. No, it can't be over the
I
phone.
love
He
it.
has to. So that's how the
Yeah.
long and short of it. So then we spent 7 years together before we ever started having children. I mean,
Yeah.
she was 35 and she looked at me one day and said, "You know, if you want a family, we need to start." And I'm like, I looked at her kind of quizzically and she says, "I'm 35." I'm like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, you're
Oh.
right. I guess you do. I guess we do. So we just boom, we got pregnant with one,
Mhm.
and we moved into a much larger apartment, into one of those. We were in a 2-room studio, a
Mhm.
bedroom and a kitchen, and like a living
Yeah.
room area with a kitchen in it, and then a bedroom in the other room. And so we were looking for an apartment, and we found this beautiful apartment on between Riverside Drive and West End. It had
Mhm.
3 bedrooms, eating kitchen, formal dining room, a den, a living room. It had laundry there. It was like, okay, French doors. It was beautiful. So,
Nice.
and we got a really good price for it for a rent.
Mm.
And she wanted to, when we told her we'd buy it, then it came time to sell it to us 2 years later. And then we had another child. We had Benedict.
Mm.
So we had Caitlin. And then literally a year and 5 days later, we had our son. We had no
Yeah.
idea. I mean, we didn't even know she was pregnant in just January, February. Like
Yeah.
Caitlin stopped breastfeeding. She wouldn't breastfeed. And we're like, this is so strange. She's just like,
Mm.
"I don't want this." We're thinking, okay, all right. So you're weaning yourself, right? Okay.
Yeah.
It turned out she was pregnant. That's why the child
Oh,
wouldn't nurse
wow.
anymore.
Wow.
So we
I love
had,
how nature works. It's amazing.
yeah, we had back-to-back kids, Irish twins.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
literally a year, 5 days apart. So, um, so we were like, okay. So our landlord said, "Well, I
So you
want to."
had two girls and a boy, yeah?
Yeah, the baby was born out here in Ridgewood. It was like years later. She's
Yeah.
5 years younger than her sister and 4 from her brother. She was like, what? Whoops, where'd you come from?
Hmm,
She was not
I
planned.
wonder.
That was just kind of snuck in there.
Yeah.
So
So you had 4 kids then?
3,
3. Okay, cool.
2 older ones, and then a younger one. She was
Okay, so
5
the
years.
first 2 were back to back, and then
Yeah, and
okay.
then the other one came like 4 years later, 5 years, 4
Yeah.
years, 4 or 5 years later. So so we moved into this beautiful apartment, and she wanted to sell it to us, and we were like, gladly. And she told me how much she wanted for it, and I'm like, no, 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 no. A
Mm.
comparable just went, and a much nicer comparable just went for 191,000. No,
Yeah.
because she wanted like 235. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah.
So she got
Yeah.
mad. Said, you got to move out.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So we found a house out in Ridgewood by her parents, her sister-in-law. Her sister lives out here. Her mom lived out here, mom and dad. So like, fine, we'll live where she grew up. I don't care. So the landlord, she sent over, because it was a co-op, she sent over her husband, Dr. Newhouse, with the real estate agent, because she wanted to list it. And he knocks on the door, and my little one, she's like 2, and she goes, this long hallway, she goes down the hallway to the door, and I open up the door. She looks at him, and she goes like this. And so he just picks her up, because he's like a grandpa. He's got children or grandchildren.
Yeah.
So he picks her up and he puts her on his hip, and he starts walking through the apartment. He's like, oh my, we had redone the whole apartment. It was a
Yeah.
disaster when we got it. She had a couple
Yeah.
of, he'd bought it for her daughter and her son-in-law
Yeah.
and their baby. And he got transferred. He worked for Warner Brothers as a writer, and he got transferred to LA. So she rented it out to a couple of young men that worked on Wall Street, like young traders. They put a pool table in the dining room, a pool table, and they had these massive parties all the time. And the family building, and it had a courtyard, and the dining room window faced the courtyard. So they got evicted. So for 2 years, the co-op board would not rent it to anyone that she sent to look at the apartment. So then here come my wife, like 8 months pregnant. She's a big old belly. There's a white boy and a black girl, and they're like, oh, perfect. I mean, the liberals just like, it was like catnip for them. So they just, yes, you can move in. So we had the apartment redone, because it was painted like the walls were pink and the ceilings were pink in one room. And then the walls were orange and the ceiling was orange in another, and purple, and green. Just these bizarre colors. So we had all the French doors redone, planed, shut, the floors polished, because they're all parquet, everything repainted. So when he's walking through it, he was like, his mouth was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And he just went from room to room saying that. So he and the real estate agent leave, and not 20 minutes later, when he got home, I get a phone call from him saying, we're not so far apart. We could probably do 190. And I'm like, well, Dr. Newhouse, I wish you had said that, but we put a down payment on a house in Ridgewood, because Mary said we had to leave. And she was like adamant about it, that there was no negotiating. Well, the real estate agent went and told him, dude, 190 is a good price. That's what the comparables are in this building. Well, she had paid 230 for it, but too bad. The markets had tanked. David Dinkins was mayor. So people were fleeing the city because of crime and stuff. So the real estate market tanked. I'm like, now it's like that apartment's probably worth $5 million easily. Easily. I'm like, oh well. But we would have had to put our kids in private schools. They would have never been able to play. I mean, we lived next to the woods. We had paths in the woods and a tree house, and a bridge over a little stream. I mean, it was a piece of heaven. So I don't regret not staying there.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful though. The apartment sounds really, really beautiful. Hey, good morning, Heather. And good evening, Teresa. I'm just saying hi to a couple of people that are watching here. Joseph, I love the stories. I can't believe that we didn't even talk about that when we first got together. So I'm really, really happy that you shared your beautiful love story with us. Um, I would love to hear a little bit more about the lucky ones, and I'd really like to build that bridge with you. So we heard about your beautiful wife, your adorable story, how you met her and got together, and you had 3 beautiful kids together. And then life changed quite a bit for you. What happened there? Like, how long from when she was sick to till she passed? Do you want to go in a little bit more detail about that? Because a lot of things happened thereafter. And that
Yeah.
was only the planting the seed for what we want to talk about later. But I want to go this step by step with you.
Well, we were on vacation. We took the 3 children to see their grandparents. My father and his wife had a condo, I guess, in Florida.
Yeah.
But it was a freestanding home. You know, had a backyard, front yard, garage. I mean, but they called it a condominium. But it was a freestanding home. So we went down there for in the winter, just to visit and have fun and go to the beach and hang out. And she was having a hard time. She was very she kept saying, I'm constipated. She looked ashen and gray. So when we got back, she went to the doctor, and doctor did an x-ray and said, I think you have a tumor. In fact, I'm pretty sure you need to go see an oncologist.
Yeah.
So she called a friend of hers who worked at Hackensack University Medical Center here, which is a very large. Well, now it's even bigger because these hospitals keep merging. But it was a large teaching hospital and one of the best cancer centers in New Jersey. It is the best cancer center in New Jersey, actually. And she called one of the administrators there that she knew. And the woman said, yes, this is who you go see, Dr. Jenis. Dr. Jenis. So Maria made the appointment for Frances, got, just like greased the wheels and got her in there. And he basically said, yeah, you have stage 4. It's metastasized to your liver. And she, we talked to him, and, operating was out of the question. He said, if I take the tumor out of your colon, what's going to happen is just going to just spread everywhere and you'll be dead within months because it'll just go everywhere. He said, the only thing we can do is just, she said, well, how long? And he said, well, about 2 years. And then she lived 3 years. She lived she lived a year longer than was predicted. Part of that, I think, was she just took, she was always healthy. We always, ate well, whatever. But I think she just exercised all the time. She just constantly exercised and just did whatever she could to slow down the growth. Eventually, she died of kidney failure. It was metastasized to her liver and her kidneys. And it was, it's not her colon, because your colon can't kill you. But the cancer, other places, it can stop the functioning of those organs. And that's what happened. Eventually, her liver shut down, her kidneys shut down.
So how, to go from feeling a bit constipated and grey and flat to then all of a sudden getting this diagnosis of stage 4 cancer is quite a shock to the system for all of you, for the whole family. How did you deal with that? How did you talk to the kids about it? Obviously, when you get a certain time frame, you want to make the most of that and do the best you can while looking after that and going through treatments. But also, what changed in your life, if you don't mind me asking? Because obviously that's such a wake-up call, and there's this whole awareness now. What did you do with that?
Well, we told the children that she was, that she had cancer and that she was getting chemotherapy and, treatment and whatever. They put a stent in so, her colon would open up.
How old were the kids at the time?
They were
roughly
14, 15. No. Let's see. 14, 13, and 8.
And 9 is 8,
9.
Mm.
So she yeah, 9. So we just told them that she was ill and that whatever, and they asked her, "Are you gonna be okay?" And she said, "Yes, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna beat this."
Mm.
My daughter did ask me, "Is mommy gonna die?" And I said, "No, I don't think so. I think mommy's gonna be okay." You know, because that's what her mom wanted. Her mom did not want me telling the children, "Yeah, she's gonna die." Now, my
Yeah.
son, on the other hand, I'm sure he knew because he wanted to be a doctor, and I'm sure he Googled colon cancer, and knew exactly the prognosis. He probably knew everything as much as we did.
Yeah.
So his reaction was much different. He just stayed close by her. My oldest daughter thought, well, there's nothing wrong, so she just went on her life. He would say, Bennett, why don't you go out? No, it's okay. I'll just hang out. Especially towards the last year, he'd say, no, I'll just. I said, well, why don't you go with your friend? No, it's okay. I'll just hang out. And it's because I think he just knew. He read enough. He knew. He knew that with that
Yeah.
kind of cancer, survival rate. If you have colon cancer, usually by the time they catch it, survival rate's only about 20%.
Mm.
You have to catch it really, really early for you to survive.
Yeah.
And they don't do colonoscopies until you're 50.
Wow.
She was like 48 when she was diagnosed.
Yeah.
So means she'd had it for what, another 2 years? She was
Mm.
probably, 46 when it started. And
Yeah.
they don't screen for that. You can't, in this country, you have to be 50 before the insurance will pay for it. Unless it's a family history of it, then obviously then they're like, okay,
Yeah.
like, so my 2 kids will start getting screened when they're 30, just
Mm.
because they're both genetically predisposed because of their
Yeah.
mom. Yeah. So, yeah, if I had to do it over again, I would probably have told my daughter at some point, but Francesca just kept saying, I'm not gonna die. Like one day I said to her, we were in the kitchen and she'd made dinner, and I said, you should write this recipe down. And my daughter was there, my oldest was there, sitting at the table, at the kitchen table, and she whirled around and said, "What? You think I'm gonna die?" I'm like, no, I was just wondering if you would just write it down, because, yeah, right. So that was her attitude. So it was never give up. I mean, literally, till the day she died, I'm gonna beat this. I'm gonna, I'm there. It's not gonna get me. She fought to the bitter end. Yeah,
Which is a
that's just
beautiful
her
attitude to
nature.
have.
Pardon?
Yeah. It's definitely a beautiful attitude to have, the not
Right.
giving up and believing. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. She was very determined.
Mm.
I mean, she lived 3 years. Doctor told her you have 2.
Yeah.
She lived 3. So,
Yeah.
and people had no idea she was ill.
Yeah.
Not
Wow.
a clue. I mean, people, when she died, people were like, I didn't even know she was sick. Like, yeah. Well, because she didn't tell anybody. She wouldn't tell anyone. Only a handful of very close friends knew.
Must have been quite challenging for you and the kids as well. She didn't want to tell anyone because it's like literally you had not many people then to talk about it really.
Well, our family knew, and everyone knew in our family, and we had a pretty big family, so it wasn't like we were alone,
Yeah.
and no one knew anything. It wasn't like that at all. So, yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about what happened thereafter, because I know your kids
Well,
cope very
after she
differently
passed away,
with
after
her passing.
yeah, she passed away in November, just before Thanksgiving, and then in April, her brother-in-law passed away. He died in a freak skydiving accident. He was her only brother. He was right in the middle. They had 2 girls, boy, 2 girls, and so she was the 4th child, so she was right below him, like maybe like 4 years younger than he was. He had been skydiving. He'd been in the Air Force. He worked for Bell Labs. He was. We never really knew what he did. I mean, he worked for Bell Labs, and he worked for the Defense Department, NSA, and the CIA. And we're like, okay, what do you do for them? Well, I can't tell you. All I can tell you is, that net that between the guy on the ground with a handheld computer and the satellite up in the sky and the tanks and the battleships and the airplanes and the artillery. He says, yeah, that whole net, he said, that's all I can tell you. That's what we work on. That's what we build, is that net. And then I have another team that crashes through, that breaks into it. And then they have, so what they do is they, you know, they set it up so, okay, we build this, then, and then they assign people to try to penetrate it, right? So they can keep our adversaries from penetrating. And that's what he did. So when he was out skydiving in Arizona, and he'd been there for 3 days skydiving, and he jumped twice before in that day. It was his last jump of the week, and he came down too fast. His, you know, and not that nothing wrong with his chute, he just came down. His descent was too fast. He was in Arizona, and it's a, you know, people think of Arizona like, oh, it's sandy, right? The desert's sandy. No, the desert's like concrete. When you hit it, it literally, it's like being on cement. And you just like, he just bounced, and just internal bleeding. And then within an hour, you know, this black SUV rolls up, takes his computer, and leaves. His laptop, because his government had all that stuff on it. You know, it had, even though it might have been secured, they wanted that. They came and got that laptop from the site, from his car.
Wow.
So then we had some friends die. Like I had a friend of mine die. He was 43, just died of a heart attack. Just boom. Was in Atlantic City with his wife and 2 other couples, and said, I don't feel good. I'm going to go upstairs and lay down. And when they came to check on him, he was dead. Yeah. Died of a heart attack. And then another friend of mine, she died of cancer. She was a city councilman. My daughter was friends with her daughter. And then that was like, and then my daughter's volleyball coach's wife passed away. So a lot of people we knew were dying within this period of time.
Oh, within such a short amount of time.
Yeah. And then in July, an uncle through marriage, he'd married my nephew. He was my nephew's father-in-law on my wife's side. But he was really close to all our kids. You know, he came to their confirmations, to their first communions. I mean, he was a member, you know, he and his wife were really like, they were family. And Bob had gotten sick, and he went into the hospital on a Monday, and Esther, my sister-in-law, called up and said, you know, Bob's in the hospital, and they just diagnosed him with cancer throughout his whole body. And he was dead by Friday. He went in on Monday, was dead by. So we went in to see him on Wednesday, because my daughter was adamant. She's like, we have to go see Uncle Bob. I'm like, okay, we'll go see Uncle Bob. So we went and saw Uncle Bob. And, you know, Bob said basically, you know, I'm at peace. You know, I'm ready to meet God. I'm okay with this. So he died he died on Friday. His funeral was Tuesday. We buried him. We went to my sister-in-law's house for the wake, you know, big party and everything here. And we came home, everyone went to bed, and my son woke up the next morning to get my daughter to go to, they were lifeguards at our local swimming pool. It's a pond. It's a large swimming pond. And she'd hung herself in the middle of the night. So he found her, and I heard all this commotion. I ran upstairs, and she was lying on the ground, and, you know, she was dead. And then about, that was in July. And then January, my father was killed, hit and run driver. Just, he got out of his truck to pick something up that fell out of his back of his truck. And early in the morning, it was like 7:30, and this guy just hit him in a pickup truck, and kept going, left him on the road dead. So we lost 4 people in our 5 people in 14 months in our family, 5 immediate family members.
Yeah.
So you kind of.
Can I ask you, how old was your daughter? It was your middle daughter?
I'm sorry, dear?
Was that your middle child?
No, my oldest daughter. So I have a girl, daughter. Boy, girl.
Yeah.
So my 17-year-old, she was 17. Old? She was 17. Yeah, she was 17 when her mom died, and now in November, and she just turned 17. So she was getting ready for her senior year. So she was just shy of 18, and my son was just shy of 17 when that happened. Yeah. So life is, it deals, lots of weird things happen. So
Yeah.
then, so I was raising, so now I had 2 kids instead of 3.
Mm.
And I've been talking to Matt, my partner, Matt Solar Sites, who co-created the Lucky Ones with me. And we've been talking for like a year and a half, trying to like just get together, for a
Mm.
drink. But with kids and our schedules and work, whatever, it just never really happened.
Yeah.
And then finally, we set a time. I said, okay, this is the date, January. I was back from Michigan. I said, listen, I'll be back from Michigan from Christmas. Let's do it like January X, whatever it was.
Mm.
Turns out there's a huge, huge blizzard that day. I mean, we're talking massive blizzard. And he's like,
Mm.
all right. He said, I can get into Manhattan on the train. He said, I can take, the subway will get me there from Brooklyn. I can right out there and I'll be right at the Kettle of Fish, or we can go in and have a drink. So, well, listen, I said, you know what? I grew up in Michigan. I have 4-wheel drive. If we don't do this now, we'll never do it. It'll never happen. So I
I
got in my
have to
car.
pause you here for a second, Joseph. This is like unbelievable because for me, I have heard this story before because we chatted, and yet it is like so much to take in. So I can only imagine for people watching this right now, this is like bam, 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 like one after the other, and your wife passed, and then all these close family members and friends of family, and then your daughter hung herself, at the age of 17. This is just so full on and so much to take in. And for you to then go ahead and do what you do, it's just really mind blowing. So I absolutely love this story. I couldn't love this anymore. And I had time to digest it, but our viewers did not have the time to digest it yet. So it's so much to take in. And your was it a business partner of yours that we're talking about right now, or
Well, he and I created
not
the
yet
Lucky
at that
Ones.
time? Yeah,
Yeah, he
but
and
I'm saying at the time when you reconnected, you were just friends. You were not
yeah, we were
in
friends.
any way.
Right. So I had met Matt through my wife. Frances was a publicist for HBO, and
Yeah,
she had launched The Sopranos, which is,
yeah.
everyone knows what The Sopranos is, right? And Matt was a film and television critic. So they met at the upfronts every year. The networks, television stations they have a convention. Well, they didn't do it this year, obviously, but they
Mm.
take their shows and they have this nice convention somewhere warm, usually, and they the networks present the shows, the new pilots, the upcoming seasons, what they're doing, their lineup. They have the stars. They have stars there. Blah blah blah. It's a big, and they have the advertisers there because the
Mm-hmm.
advertisers are buying airtime, right? Well,
Yeah.
HBO goes, even though they don't have advertisers, they still go to the upfronts because the critics go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where she and Matt met, was when she was doing The Sopranos there, because no one had heard of The Sopranos. So she dealt with the press because she was a publicist.
Yeah.
And they became friends. And then he introduced his wife and his oldest daughter to our family. So they would come out from Brooklyn to Ridgewood, New Jersey, and spend weekends with us. So the
Mm-hmm.
4 of us became friends. So when his wife died, let's see, oh, Jen was in her 30s. Hannah was 8, and they just had a baby boy, James. Yeah, I think James
Mm-hmm.
was 2 at the time. Um, yeah, she had some kind of heart condition, and just like she was at her desk working and just keeled over dead. No one knew anything. Like no one knew there was anything. No one knew there was anything wrong with her heart. There
Yeah.
had been no warning signs, nothing. Just bang. So
Was that
that's how.
before or after your wife passed?
Before, and then
Okay.
3 years later, Frances passed away.
Yeah.
So having both lost our wives, we were like, well, let's get together, because he came to
Yeah.
Frances's funeral, and we tried to get together for years. So when we finally got together on this stormy night, he looked
Mm.
at me after we'd been in at the bar and we were going out to get something to eat, and he said to me, how do you not how do I deal with all the death in my, but um like, how do you deal with Frances being gone? Doesn't that bother you? I'm like, well, I said, Matt, I'm one of the lucky ones. I mean, I was lucky. I had 27 years of marriage to a wonderful woman. I have no regrets. I
Mm.
feel no resentment. I feel like I don't feel like I was cheated out of anything. I said, people live their whole lives and never have this. And he said, oh my
Mm.
God, I can't believe you're saying this to me. I'm like, why? He said, well, he said, I was in a bereavement group and I was walking out the door with this older gentleman who was in his 70s. Now, you remember Matt was in his mid 30s at the time.
Mm.
And um, he said to Marvin, Matt said to Marvin, don't you wish you weren't married so that you didn't have to deal with this grief? And Marvin looked at him and said, no, we're one of the lucky ones.
Mm.
He said, most people go through their life and they never have this. Even when they're married, they don't have this.
Yeah.
He says, you were blessed. So when I said I was one of the lucky ones, he's like, I can't believe you said that to me. I'm like, well, that's how I feel. And
And this is exactly where you got me, because I could not believe that you said that. And I came into this story years and years later, and you had me as I'm the lucky one. I was just so blown away by this concept, because I sometimes feel when I created this group, Loving Life After Loss, I sometimes felt quite alone with my view on how to handle grief, how to handle someone's passing. And, when Rob passed, it was like that as well. He had a brain aneurysm, he collapsed in the shower and died. And we had 13 and a half years together. I think they were the most amazing and most beautiful years. I was so blessed with him. He absolutely adored me, put me on a pedestal, and I couldn't have had a better life. Seriously, it was just blessings beyond measure all around. And when I dealt with my grief the way I did, and all my focus went into creating the most beautiful life there is for our boys and myself, because that's what we
right,
promised to each other, I didn't get a lot of understanding from people around me. There was this, oh, she's still in denial, she's still in shock, she doesn't know what's yet to come. And I'm like, stop telling me what's to come. I create what's to come. And when you said that, I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm like, that's exactly how I felt. I felt that I was so blessed to have had that, because a lot of people around me, friends, family, and people that I know of, never even had close to what Rob and I lived for 13 and a half years. And you had double of that. So it was just, this is not a comparison or competition, but it's just knowing what we have and being so grateful for it. It's just, I believe, the most beautiful way to look at it, because when you stare at the closed door, you can't see any opportunities around you. And that is what I love so much about your project. So tell us about, because now I'm like literally sitting on the edge of my seat. I want you to share with our viewers how the whole concept of the lucky ones then started, because this was obviously planting the seed, realizing that you both had this mindset of, we're the lucky ones. What we had is just so special, and let's celebrate that. So how did that turn into what you turned it into?
well, after I'd said that to him, he said, I've always wanted to do some kind of so he said, I thought it would be cool to do something where people could tell their stories on
Mm.
video. And I'm like, all right. So we talked about it a little bit. He had mentioned that it was very similar to when people died in 9/11. They had
Mm.
people would put pictures up and they would write stories about the loved one
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
lost. They were
Mm.
all over. They were all over downtown in
Yeah.
Wall Street. So I went home and I just kind of sat down and I said, okay, and I did an outline and I kind of figured out, how do we do this? What are we going to do? And I started writing, and we'll do these interviews. We'll just do like a 5-minute, 6-minute interview.
Mm.
So after I outlined what we're going to do, the questions, I ran it by him. He added some more questions. So then we went out and we talked to different people. We found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people
Mm.
to interview. We hired a camera crew, shot for 2 days, shot 5 interviews in 2 days,
Mm.
sit down interviews. Different one was in downtown Manhattan, 2 were in New Jersey,
Mhm.
One was in Brooklyn, and they were just all over the place. But we just look, we'll just do it. One we did in the park in Union Square Park. You know, it was beautiful because it's outside and there's trees and it was very pretty. So we did that, and then we started, and then we put together this pilot. It was a half-hour pilot of these 5 different segments, and we shopped it around, and all the networks, all the A&E, Discovery, you know, all of them, PBS, all the way down to HBO, Showtime. They're like, oh, we love this. It's beautiful. We love it. They just didn't know what to do with it. They're like, it's just, you know, it really doesn't fit with what we do, whatever they could say. They just didn't know what to do because no one had ever come to them with like, let's talk about dead people. Let's do little mini biographies about everyday people. They were just like, huh? Even though they loved it, was beautifully shot, and the stories are wonderful and fascinating.
Where does that fit in?
Oh yeah. We have a dozen quotes from network execs. You know, it's wonderful, but so it's kind of like no one's done it yet, so no one's going to do it on that scale.
I want to quickly mention here 2 things. Shelena is one of the lucky ones as well. She has just said, I love that I felt that the luckiest woman in the world, having had my Bruce in my life for the time that we had, because Jelena is completely aligned with that mindset as well. I absolutely love it. She actually became one of my admins in the group because she's just been such an advocate of this whole concept of loving life after loss. She's definitely one of the lucky ones as well, and really knows about that and appreciates that. So I absolutely love that comment, Shelena. Thank you. And also I want to quickly mention before I'll let you continue how it then I'm not going to take that away. Joseph will actually share the links to his website after our interview, so you can have a look at all those videos, because I really urge you to go and have a look at some of them. I had a look at his website and watched some of the videos, and it's just so beautiful. The stories that are told completely authentically from their hearts, and to hear that, I just absolutely love this project. So what happened thereafter? A lot of people loved it, didn't know what to do with it, and then?
We decided, well, we'll just make our own streaming platform. We'll just build our own website.
Because we can. Yeah.
Because we can. And so we did, and then someone approached us, Roma Downey approached us, and she has Light Workers. It's a whole, well, it's quite large. She has a contract with MGM, so they're going to do a whole primetime network of shows that'll go on, and she's already got everything lined up. But they were doing a web series, and they wanted us to contribute to it, but we had to sign a contract with MGM, which said that basically they owned it and we didn't, and we're like, can't do that. We can't do that. I got stupid written across my forehead. Yeah, MGM owns it, and then they can say, yeah, you guys see it, bye. And we don't have a job, we don't have nothing. We got zipped. So we kind of passed on that. We had no choice. We couldn't take that deal. But we were creating our own streaming platform anyways. So we launched that platform in June of 2019. And by December of 2019, we were getting tons of press. We were getting interview requests, booked on television shows, and then everything stopped. I mean, dead. I mean, I couldn't fly to do TV interviews. It was like, nope, done. Everything just like shut down. So we've been sitting around for about a year like the rest of the world, just going, when's this going to be over? Let's go, folks. Come on, let's get back to normal. Yeah, people die. Happens every day. Let's go. And so we're just waiting. So I'm hoping by the end of the summer we can start filming again and getting back to doing what we do. we shot these 6-minute videos, these long formats. And Frank Rich, I don't know if you know, well, he's a New York Times, he was a New York Times theater critic. That's how Matt knew him. And then he became an op-ed writer for the Times. And then he became executive producer of the show Veep. Do you know on HBO? You ever see it with Julianne Dreyfus? Oh, she's won like an Emmy every year for it.
Yeah.
But she's on. So he saw the original pilot and he said, you should like talk to more than just widows and widowers. You should open this up to like everybody, because I would love to talk about my sister-in-law. Like, okay. So we did. So before we launched, we were talking, we had interviews of all sorts of different people. And then we did these man on the street interviews where we go out and we just approach people randomly. We go out with 2 cameras. I have a microphone and we just ask people, is there anyone, that you were lucky to have known in your life that's passed away that you want to celebrate? Who do you want to talk about? And you're like, oh, I got someone. And it's like, it could be anyone. And we've had people talk about their Girl Scout leaders, their cousins, their grandparents, their moms, their dads, their brothers, their sisters, their aunts or uncles, their friends or colleagues. One was a cop talking about another cop. One was a private nurse for Christopher Reeve, the Superman, right? He was his private nurse. And we're like,
wow.
We're like, okay, who do you want to talk about? He goes, Chris Reeve. And I look at him and said, you mean Christopher Reeve, like the actor? And he goes, yeah, I was his private nurse. I'm like,
wow.
Okay. And it was interesting because what Bill, you're thinking, okay, what did Bill get from Christopher? And so you listen to the interview and you realize humility. He said, I learned from him humility, just how to be humble. I was like, wow, okay. And that was the takeaway from his interview. I mean, he talked about other things. He talked about Robin Williams coming in and breaking his bed because he was jumping up and down on it. And these are these are really expensive beds. And Rom comes in and starts jumping and boom, breaks bed. But he just told different stories about his relationship and what he did with Chris. So we get stories about all sorts of people. And then interestingly enough, we get, we thought that mostly older people would want to do this, people like 35 and older. Turns out, man, kids 30 and younger.
Older people, 35 is not old.
It is when you talk about advertising and demographics. It is. It's right. We thought we'd go 35 to 65 would be like that 30-year span. We're getting kids saying, yeah, I want to talk about my friend. I want to talk about my grandma. I want to talk about my great grandma. I want to talk about so-and-so, my colleague, my friend. Turns out a lot of younger people have lost friends to suicide. We probably have, I would guess, 6 people out of the 100 that I've interviewed. I know that the person that they were talking about committed suicide.
Wow.
And then we have young people that want to talk about whomever, they're a relative or an aunt or someone special that they were lucky to have known. And it's interesting that we thought it would skew older. And it turns out probably 50% of our interviews are people 30 and under.
Yeah.
It's just, they're like, yeah, no, I got someone. And maybe it's because of the culture they live in now with their cameras and their phones. And they're always, Instagram, they're always self-promoting themselves. Look what I'm doing. Look what I'm eating. So they don't care to be, they don't care. They can't, sure, put a camera in front of my face, And then we cut these little interviews down to a minute and we put them on our social media channels so that people can watch them. They're fun.
Absolutely love this. So, Joseph, I need to ask you a couple of questions because we're almost at the end now with our time. But before I let you go, I need you to tell us a few things. First of all, I'd love for you to share a couple of links after the interview in the comments below so people can actually find the website where they can have a look at those interviews. And B, I would love to know, how is this going to happen from here on in? If people go like, oh my God, I still need to tell my story. I'm actually near you right now, but are you open to business right now? Are you filming? Are you not allowed to? I'm not really sure about your restrictions where you're at right now. I think you're pretty much in lockdown still. Are you?
Well,
or are you allowed to?
Well, no, it depends on what state you live in. I mean,
Yeah.
Florida is a
Okay.
free state. So, and I
Yeah.
say that Florida, you can do anything you want. You can go there, you know, people move around
Yeah.
freely.
Yeah.
Not so much in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
Um,
And what I want you to do though is that you share whatever you can and whatever you want to in terms of how can people actually get in touch with you if they want to hear more, if they want to get involved, if they just want to chat to you, whatever the best way is to contact you. Maybe you can share that in the comments.
sure. So what
I'd
we
love
do is
that. And then of course, your social media handles where people can have a look at all these videos and
yeah.
everything. Just feel free to share whatever you want
Well,
in the
they can,
comments.
anyone can go to our streaming platform, which is
Yeah.
luckyones.tv.com. It's just real
Yeah,
simple.
but we will share the link as well. You don't need to
Yeah,
write it down right now.
yeah. luckyones.tv.com, and you follow us at
Yeah,
luckyones.tv.com,
yeah, perfect.
or Lucky Ones at Lucky Ones TV, I should say.
Yeah,
So it's pretty simple. We try to make it as simple as possible. Uh, People can submit their own stories, and we've got a place. So if you go to luckyones.tv.com, you can upload your own story. You can do a video story if you want, or you
very
can
cool.
do a written story. And we have people that do stories all the time. What we have, so people have written some beautiful stories, and they add photographs. So there's photographs of the story, and they're usually about 800 words, and they're just a little
Wow.
why I was lucky to have known this person.
Mm.
And we've got maybe a half a dozen where people have contributed. We'd like to have more people contribute. And then the videos, if we have the ability to shoot them remotely. So if someone, you know, if we find someone that's really, really interesting, we want to shoot like a 6-minute video, we can sit down and do a video using their iPhone. We just take control of their phone with
That's
software,
so
and
fascinating.
their lens becomes our camera, and we can
Yeah,
control everything. So it's really nice. So they should just
awesome.
reach out to us at contactluckyones.tv.com.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. I have to say it was such an honor to have you and such a pleasure to have this interview with you because, you know, as we said before, I never prepare any questions for this interview. And to hear this beautiful, beautiful love story, and then for you to talk about all these people that are so close to you passing in your life, it really takes a lot. And it takes somebody who's really worked through that and who's really got this mindset of we're the lucky ones to tell a story like that in the way that you have. So I feel very honored that you have shared that with our group. As always, there's this little disclaimer. These interviews are shared on various platforms as well. And for anyone who wants to share this interview, the YouTube link will be uploaded in a little while. So you can actually take the YouTube link because from a closed group, you cannot share outside. So I will upload it to YouTube and you can share that. If you feel that somebody needs to hear about Joseph's project or about Joseph's story, I would love for you to share it. And Joseph, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I really loved having you here. Are there any final words that you would like to share with our viewers before we have to go?
Yeah, I would like to say, at the Lucky Ones, we kind of look at it this way. Death does not define us. Doesn't define any of us, anyone that we know. It doesn't define who you are. What defines who you were is how you lived your life and treated other people. So we want to celebrate those common bonds that we have with those people. We want to celebrate those bonds and continue to celebrate them.
Yeah.
At luckyones.tv.com.
That's a perfect commercial. I absolutely love that. And I also say for those who are left behind, it also defines us how we respond to it. You know, we have the choice to just look at their death and really reduce their whole being to their passing, or to look at their whole life and celebrate that. And that's what I'm all about as well. And that's why I love how aligned we are with our mindsets here. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing your story so
Thank you for having
openly.
me on.
I really, really love that. And any questions, beautiful people watching this here, just feel free to post it below. I'm more than happy to tag Joseph. You can tag him in there as well, or pass it on, because Joseph's not a huge fan of Facebook, so he might not see all your comments, but I'll make sure that if there's something that you would like to know or ask, to pass it on. But we'll also have all the links and possibilities and opportunities to contact Joseph in the comments below. Thank you so much for your time. Have a beautiful day or evening wherever you are. This is Marie and Joseph. Bye for now.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.